Sophie had always believed in love. She grew up with the idea that love was supposed to be pure, passionate, and something worth waiting for. But as she stood at the entrance of the grand mansion, she questioned everything she had ever believed. This was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, but instead, she felt nothing but an overwhelming sense of coldness. The mansion loomed in front of her, towering and distant. The lights flickered in the massive windows, casting eerie shadows across the driveway. It looked like something from a movie, but this wasn't a movie. This was her life. Her wedding day. The day she had been dreaming of for as long as she could remember. Or at least, that's what she had been told it was supposed to be. Her heart raced as she stepped forward, her heels clicking against the polished marble floor. The hallway stretched on endlessly before her, adorned with exquisite paintings and delicate chandeliers. The air felt stale, as though it hadn't been touched in years. Every room seemed empty, every hallway lifeless. Yet, she had to admit, there was something undeniably beautiful about it all. The luxury was undeniable. The wealth was undeniable. But something was terribly wrong. Sophie adjusted her dress nervously. It was a delicate white satin, flowing gently as she walked. Her mother had insisted she wear it, classic, elegant, timeless. Sophie hadn't had the heart to argue. She had always respected her mother's wishes, even though she was no longer sure what she truly wanted. But as she gazed at the cold, vast space around her, she couldn't help but wonder if her life was about to take a turn she wasn't prepared for. Her mother had always been a woman of simple means, a hard worker who had raised Sophie on her own. She had big dreams for her daughter, dreams of a life far beyond what she could offer. That's how Sophie had ended up with Nathan. Nathan Hawke was a man of immense wealth, a business tycoon who had made his fortune through real estate, technology, and 1,000 other ventures. His name alone carried power, and Sophie had hoped, that his wealth would offer her the life she'd always wanted. But today, as she stood on the precipice of that life, Sophie felt more lost than ever. She glanced at her reflection in a mirror along the hallway. Her face was pale, her eyes tired. Was she really about to marry Nathan? Was she making a mistake? She couldn't answer her own questions. The wedding was set in motion. Everything was in place. But deep down, she had the sinking feeling that she was walking into a life she wasn't ready for. At 20, Sophie had never been with anyone intimately. She had waited, believing in the idea of a love so deep, so real, that when it happened, it would be perfect. But her relationship with Nathan was anything but perfect. It was cold, clinical. She hadn't felt a single spark from him in months. Yet, here she was, about to say, "I do." What had happened to the girl who dreamed of a passionate romance, a love that would sweep her off her feet? What had happened to that naive girl who believed in the power of love? The door to the chapel opened before her, and Sophie felt a chill wash over her. There, at the altar, stood Nathan. Tall, dark, and handsome. He was everything a woman could want, at least, on the outside. His perfectly tailored suit hugged his muscular frame, and his dark hair was neatly combed back. But his face was as emotionless as always. His blue eyes seemed to stare past her, as if she was nothing more than a figure in his life that didn't quite matter. Sophie took a deep breath and walked toward him, her heart beating louder with each step. The air around her seemed to thicken, suffocating her with the weight of what was about to happen. She reached the altar, standing across from Nathan, and the priest began his speech. But Sophie wasn't listening. Her mind was racing. She felt the eyes of the guests on her, but she didn't feel them. The moment felt hollow. The guests, the mansion, the luxurious decor, it all felt like a stage. A stage where the two of them played their parts. But Sophie had no idea what her part really was. Was she here because she loved Nathan? Or was she here because she had been swept into a life she wasn't sure she understood? "Do you take Nathan Hawke to be your lawfully wedded husband?" the priest's voice broke through her thoughts. The words hung in the air like an invisible threat. Sophie's throat went dry. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. It felt as though her entire existence was frozen in time, and the weight of the decision before her was too much to bear. Nathan turned his eyes toward her, but his gaze was distant. His expression remained neutral, almost cold. There was no warmth in his eyes, no love, no affection. Sophie swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest. She was supposed to feel joy. She was supposed to feel excitement. But all she felt was fear. "I do," Nathan said, his voice steady and unwavering. Sophie's heart dropped into her stomach. The words, so simple, felt like a dagger in her chest. She glanced around the room, her gaze flicking to the ornate stained glass windows, the golden chandeliers. Everything seemed so surreal. It felt like she was in a dream, one that she couldn't wake up from. "I do," she finally whispered, her voice shaky. The words felt empty as they left her lips. As the priest moved forward, announcing them as husband and wife, Sophie's mind spun in circles. What had she just done? What had she committed herself to? The reception that followed was a blur of laughter, clinking glasses, and polite conversation. Sophie floated through the evening, her thoughts consumed by the eerie feeling that something was horribly wrong. Nathan remained by her side, but he didn't speak much. He was a man of few words. But even his silence now felt like a wall between them. At one point, Sophie caught a glimpse of herself in the reflection of a large window. She didn't recognize the woman staring back at her. This wasn't the woman she had imagined herself to be on her wedding day. She had dreamed of a wedding full of love and laughter, not a cold, sterile affair. But as the night wore on, Sophie's unease only grew. It wasn't just Nathan's cold demeanor. It was something else, something she couldn't place. There was a secret lurking behind his eyes, one that Sophie had not yet uncovered. She couldn't shake the feeling that this man who she had just married, was hiding something from her. When the night came to a close, Nathan led her to their suite, the coldness in the air wrapping around her like a heavy blanket. The grand staircase twisted upward, leading them to the master bedroom. Sophie could barely make out the details of the room in the dim light. The bed was enormous, draped in silky sheets, but it felt like a place for strangers, not for newlyweds. Nathan didn't speak as he closed the door behind them, his movements robotic. Sophie sat on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling in her lap. "Are you cold?" Nathan asked, his voice flat. Sophie looked up at him, confusion in her eyes. "What do you mean?" Nathan walked over to a nearby dresser and poured himself a glass of wine. He didn't offer her one. "Just asking," he said, taking a sip. Sophie's throat tightened. What was he doing? What was going on in his mind? Why didn't he seem even the slightest bit interested in her? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden realization, a horrifying one. She wasn't just marrying a cold man. She was marrying a man with secrets. Secrets that she hadn't even begun to understand. But what were those secrets? And why did it feel like Sophie had just stepped into a life that was anything but what she had imagined? As the minutes stretched into hours, Sophie lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The quiet was deafening. She had no answers. No clarity. But one thing was certain, the night was long and suffocating for Sophie. She lay in the grand bed, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. The mansion, with all its luxury, felt like a cage. Every corner, every shadow, seemed to hold a secret she wasn't meant to uncover. She glanced at Nathan, who lay beside her. His back was turned to her, his breathing steady, yet his presence felt distant, cold, far from what she had imagined for her wedding night. For a moment, Sophie thought she heard something. It was faint, like a whisper or a soft creak from somewhere deep within the house. She strained her ears, but the sound disappeared as quickly as it had come. Maybe it was just the old house settling, or maybe it was the nervous energy inside her that made her overthink. But something felt off. Sophie shifted under the heavy sheets, the silk against her skin almost suffocating her. She couldn't sleep. Her mind kept racing back to the day, the wedding, Nathan's coldness, the eerie emptiness of the mansion. She hadn't signed up for this. She hadn't imagined a life like this. She had imagined love. She had imagined excitement, a connection. But with Nathan? There was only silence. She glanced at the clock beside the bed. It was well past midnight. The air was thick with tension, and Sophie could hardly breathe. She thought about getting up, but Nathan had already seemed so distant. The last thing she wanted was to push him further away. But then again, what if the distance between them was already too wide to bridge? She turned on her side, staring at his silhouette in the dim moonlight. His expression was unreadable. For a moment, she thought she saw a flicker of emotion, but it was gone in the blink of an eye. Nathan wasn't the man she had imagined marrying. Sophie had always believed in the fairy tales, the ones where love conquers all. But Nathan wasn't her Prince Charming. Nathan wasn't even close. The more she thought about it, the more she felt like a stranger in her own life. The wedding, the vows, the promises, it all felt like a charade. There was no spark. No fire. No connection. Just a cold, clinical exchange of words and formalities. Sophie didn't know what to do with the growing pit in her stomach. She couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Hours passed, and sleep never came. The room felt colder now, the silence louder. Sophie decided she couldn't lie still any longer. She had to find out what was going on. She couldn't live like this, trapped in a life she didn't understand. She slowly got out of bed, careful not to wake Nathan. The floor beneath her feet was icy, sending a chill up her spine. She padded softly toward the door, opening it just enough to slip through. The mansion was eerily quiet, save for the distant hum of something she couldn't place. She felt like an intruder in her own life. It was as if she had walked into a house that wasn't meant for her. But she couldn't shake the feeling that the answers to her questions lay hidden within these walls. Sophie wandered the long hallways, her footsteps echoing through the empty spaces. The air smelled old, like dust and something faintly metallic, but it wasn't unpleasant. The grandeur of the place was undeniable, yet it made her feel small, insignificant. The walls were lined with portraits of people she didn't recognize, their eyes following her every step. She continued down the hall, her heart pounding in her chest. The mansion was too quiet, too still. Every creak of the floorboards made her jump. She passed what appeared to be a study, its door slightly ajar. Sophie hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open. The room was dimly lit, a single lamp casting a soft glow on the dark wood paneling. The shelves were lined with books, some old, some new, but all perfectly arranged. Everything about this room screamed wealth and sophistication. But there was something else in the air, something she couldn't place. As Sophie stepped further into the room, her gaze fell on a large desk at the far end. On it were several open folders and papers scattered across the surface. Curiosity tugged at her. She couldn't resist. She approached the desk and picked up one of the folders. The contents were filled with names, dates, and financial statements. But then she noticed something that made her blood run cold. There were documents with her name on them. Sophie stared at the papers, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. These weren't just business contracts. These were personal documents. Personal details about her life. Everything from her childhood to her recent activities, even her medical records. How could Nathan have these? Why did he have them? The questions swirled in her mind as she flipped through the pages, each one revealing more unsettling information. The deeper she dug into the folders, the more she realized that Nathan had been keeping tabs on her long before they had ever met. There were records of her family's financial situation, her school grades, even notes on the places she had visited in the last year. This wasn't just a man interested in a woman. This was a man who had been tracking her every move. Sophie's hands trembled as she set the papers down. The reality of the situation was starting to sink in, but the fear was almost too much to bear. She had married a man who had watched her for years, who knew more about her than anyone should. How had he even gotten this information? She turned toward the desk, her mind racing for answers, but then something caught her eye. In the corner of the room, just beneath the window, was a small cabinet. It wasn't as elegant as the rest of the room's furnishings, but it looked old, an antique, perhaps. Sophie's heart skipped a beat. She walked over to the cabinet, her pulse quickening. What was inside? Why did it feel like there was something hidden there, something that Nathan didn't want her to find? With trembling hands, she opened the cabinet door. Inside, Sophie found a collection of strange artifacts, old books, a few odd trinkets, and a small wooden box. The box was simple, but its dark wood was worn, as though it had been handled countless times. She hesitated for only a moment before lifting it out. The moment her fingers touched the box, an uneasy shiver ran down her spine. Sophie opened the box, and what she found inside took her breath away. It wasn't a treasure or a piece of jewelry. It was something far more unsettling. There were photographs inside, photographs of her, of Sophie, taken years ago. Some were from when she was a child, others from her teenage years. But there were newer ones as well, pictures taken in the last few months, pictures of Sophie at places she had visited, at events she had attended. Nathan had been watching her. Long before they ever met. He had been in her life, tracking her every move, long before she had any idea who he was. The shock of it hit Sophie like a physical blow. Her hands shook as she dropped the box back into the cabinet, stepping away from it as though it might suddenly spring to life and trap her. Her mind raced. Nathan's obsession with her was deeper than she could have ever imagined. It wasn't just a marriage of convenience. It wasn't just about wealth or status. Nathan had planned everything from the beginning, had manipulated the course of their lives to bring them to this moment. Sophie couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. The walls were closing in on her. She was trapped. She had to get out of this place, away from Nathan, away from the truth that threatened to suffocate her. But where could she go? She had no one. No one but herself. She stood frozen in the dark study, the weight of the secrets crashing down on her. She had to find a way to break free, to uncover the full extent of Nathan's lies, and to escape the web of manipulation he had spun around her. But one question lingered in her mind: why? Why had Nathan done all of this? Why had he chosen her? Before she could contemplate further, a sudden noise from the hallway startled her. Sophie froze, her heart leaping into her throat. Someone was coming. She quickly turned off the lamp and hurried to hide behind a nearby bookshelf, her breath shallow. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Someone was moving through the hallway, coming toward the study. Sophie held her breath, praying they wouldn't find her. The footsteps in the hallway grew louder, too close, too steady. Sophie's breath caught in her throat as she pressed herself deeper into the shadows behind the bookshelf, praying she wouldn't be heard. Her heart raced in her chest, threatening to betray her hiding spot. It was the longest moment of her life, but it felt like time itself had come to a standstill. The door to the study creaked open just a crack. Sophie held her breath, her body frozen in place, every muscle tense. The footsteps stopped right outside the room. A figure shadowed the doorway, their silhouette just visible in the dim light spilling from the hallway. For a moment, Sophie thought she was caught, but then, the figure didn't move any closer. Instead, they remained just out of sight, standing in the doorway as though deciding whether to enter. Sophie couldn't move. She couldn't make a sound. She squeezed her eyes shut, desperately hoping they would leave, praying they wouldn't find her hiding in the dark corner of the study. Then, a voice. "Sophie?" The voice was calm, familiar, but cold, too cold. It was Nathan. His voice, deep and composed, echoed through the silence like a hammer striking metal. Sophie's heart dropped to her stomach. He knew she was in the study. But how? How had he found her? Did he know everything she had discovered? Another moment of silence. Stretched on, thick and suffocating. Sophie considered running, but the thought of being caught in the act made her freeze. Her legs felt like they were glued to the floor. She couldn't even bring herself to breathe too loudly. "Nathan, Sophie began, but her voice caught in her throat. It was too late. He was already there. The door creaked open further. Nathan stepped into the room, his figure now fully visible. He looked at her, standing there like a silent statue. Sophie saw the glint of something in his eyes, something unreadable. Was it anger? Or was it something more calculating? Sophie stood, her hands trembling. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know what to do. Nathan didn't move. Instead, he simply regarded her, studying her as though she was an object, a puzzle he hadn't quite figured out. "I didn't expect you to be up," he said softly, his tone cool but not unkind. "You should have gone back to bed." Sophie could hear the undertone of something much darker in his words. She looked at him, trying to steady her racing thoughts. But what could she say? She had just uncovered a secret about him, a secret that made her question everything. She had to say something, anything to get out of this situation. But Nathan didn't wait for her to respond. Instead, he stepped further into the room, his gaze never leaving her face. Sophie wanted to back away, but her feet remained rooted to the spot. "You're looking at my things," Nathan said, his voice now laced with a quiet intensity. His words weren't an accusation. They were a statement, as if he already knew. He didn't need to ask her why she was snooping. Sophie's stomach twisted. Her mind was a whirlwind, scrambling for a response. She had to be careful. Nathan had planned everything so meticulously. She couldn't let him know how much she had uncovered, how much she understood. I wasn't snooping," Sophie stammered, trying to find her voice. Just what?" Nathan interrupted, his lips curling into a slight smirk. "I thought you were the innocent type, Sophie. But clearly, you have more curiosity than I gave you credit for." His eyes darkened slightly, and Sophie felt a chill run down her spine. It wasn't just the coldness of the mansion that unsettled her now. It was Nathan himself. He had been watching her, studying her every move. And she had just walked right into his trap. "You have no idea how much you don't know," Nathan continued, his tone becoming more serious. "You think you're uncovering something hidden, something dark. But it's not what you think." Sophie felt her heart skip a beat. Was he admitting to something? What did he mean by that? "You're wrong, Nathan," Sophie said, her voice shaking but determined. "I know exactly what's going on. You've been following me. You've been watching my every move. You've been planning this, haven't you?" Nathan's expression shifted, but not in the way Sophie had expected. His face became unreadable, his eyes narrowing as if he was considering her words carefully. Then, he exhaled a slow breath, his posture relaxing, and he leaned back against the desk. "Do you think this is some grand conspiracy, Sophie?" he asked, his voice quieter now. "You've walked into something much bigger than you realize. It's not just about me. It's about you, too. It's always been about you." Sophie's head spun. What was he talking about? "What do you mean? What does that mean?" Nathan didn't answer right away. Instead, he moved to the desk and picked up one of the folders she had seen earlier. He flipped through it casually, as though it was all just another day for him. Then, he turned toward her. "You were never meant to find out," Nathan said, his voice now a low, almost dangerous murmur. "But since you have, I guess it's time you understood what's really been happening." He paused, looking at Sophie intently. "You think I've been controlling you. You think I've been watching you, manipulating your every move. But you're wrong. It's not about control. It's about survival. Yours. Mine. And something much bigger than us both." Sophie's mind raced, but she couldn't make sense of his words. She wasn't sure if he was trying to confuse her or if he was being completely serious. She couldn't tell anymore. She had stumbled into a twisted web of secrets that she wasn't prepared for. "What do you mean, survival?" Sophie asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and frustration. Nathan's eyes glinted with something dark, something she hadn't seen before. "Survival of the fittest," he said slowly. "But you're not just any person. You're special." Sophie felt her throat tighten. "Special? What are you talking about?" Nathan pushed himself off the desk and took a few steps toward her. "You were chosen. Your family, they were involved in something long before you were born. And I've been following that path, waiting for the right moment. The moment when you would understand what's really at stake here." Sophie recoiled, her mind spinning. "You're saying this is about my family?" Nathan nodded. "Your family's history runs deeper than you think. I didn't want you to find out like this, Sophie. But now that you have, there's no turning back. You need to understand. There's so much more at play. More than you could ever imagine." Sophie's mind was a whirlwind of confusion. "What do you mean? What are you talking about? What's happening?" Nathan took another step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'll tell you everything, Sophie. But you're not going to like it. And you might not believe it." Sophie's stomach dropped. "Tell me. Please. I need to know." Nathan's gaze softened slightly. "It's about power. Control. And something that has been passed down through generations. Your family is at the center of it. And you're the key." Sophie felt her breath catch. She was at the edge of something she didn't fully understand. The truth was closer now, but it was just as terrifying as it was mysterious. Nathan took a final step toward her, his voice low and steady. "You've been part of something much bigger than yourself. And now you have a choice. You can either walk away from all of this, pretend you never knew, or you can face the truth. But once you know, you'll never be the same." Sophie was reeling. Everything she thought she knew about her life was now in question. She had been married to a man who wasn't who he appeared to be. Her family's past was shrouded in secrets, and now Nathan was telling her that she was at the center of it all. How was she supposed to process this? "I don't know what you want from me," Sophie said, her voice cracking with emotion. "I don't know what you're asking." Nathan's lips curled into a small smile, but there was no warmth in it. "I'm not asking you for anything, Sophie. I'm just telling you the truth. It's up to you to decide how you want to handle it." The room felt like it was closing in on her. She didn't know what to believe anymore. Was Nathan lying to her? Was he telling the truth? As he turned to leave, he glanced over his shoulder. "Think carefully, Sophie. The truth will set you free, but it may also destroy everything you thought you knew." The echo of Nathan's footsteps faded, leaving Sophie alone in the study. Her breath was ragged, and her chest tightened as she tried to process everything he had just told her. Was he playing with her? Or was he serious? Her head spun, a whirl of confusion and fear clouding her thoughts. The darkness of the room mirrored the fog in her mind. She felt like she had stepped into an unknown world where nothing was as it seemed. A world where Nathan, the man she thought she knew, was not the man he appeared to be. She had always believed in their relationship, believed in him, but now, everything felt like a lie. Sophie sat down at the desk, her hands shaking as they gripped the edge. She glanced at the folder Nathan had left behind, the one she had seen earlier. The one that seemed to hold more than just corporate documents. There had to be something in there that would explain everything. Something that would help her make sense of his cryptic words. But what if it was too late? What if everything had already been set in motion, and she was just a pawn in a game much bigger than herself? She couldn't stop thinking about his words, "You're the key." What did he mean? What role did she play in all of this? And why hadn't he told her sooner? Why had he kept her in the dark? The silence in the room felt oppressive, suffocating. Sophie needed answers. She had to confront Nathan. She couldn't let him control the narrative any longer. But how? How could she trust him now? How could she trust anything he said when it all felt like a twisted puzzle? With shaking hands, Sophie grabbed the folder. She flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning the dense text. Most of it was incomprehensible to her, filled with jargon and unfamiliar terms. But as she flipped through, one page caught her eye. It was a family tree. Her family tree. Her heart skipped a beat as she traced the names with her finger. Her parents were there, of course, but there were also names she didn't recognize, ancestors, distant relatives. And in the very center of the page, her name was boldly marked. But what stood out most was the line that connected her to the others, an intricate web of connections stretching back generations. It wasn't just her family. It was something far bigger. A legacy she had never known. Sophie's head reeled as she tried to make sense of it. The names, the dates, the symbols, they didn't add up. But then, something caught her eye. At the top of the page, in small print, was a phrase, "The Chosen One." Her breath caught in her throat. Her fingers trembled as she ran over the words. The Chosen One. Was this what Nathan meant? Was this what he had been preparing her for? Sophie closed her eyes, feeling a wave of dizziness wash over her. What had she gotten herself into? What was Nathan asking of her? She leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. The room felt small now. The walls seemed to close in, pressing in on her thoughts. She had to find out what Nathan was hiding. There had to be more to this. There had to be answers. But where could she turn? Who could she trust? The next morning, Sophie woke with a start. The events of the previous night played over in her mind like a nightmare she couldn't shake. Nathan's cryptic words. The documents. The family tree. It all pointed to something bigger than her. Something she wasn't prepared for. She had to find the truth. But how? Nathan had made it clear that she had a choice. But what was the choice? Was there even a choice? Sophie's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. Her heart raced, her pulse quickening as she heard the familiar rhythm. Nathan. She wasn't ready for this. She wasn't ready to face him again. But she didn't have a choice. If she was going to figure out what was going on, she had to confront him. The door opened, and Nathan stepped into the room. He looked calm, collected as always, but Sophie could see the flicker of something in his eyes. Something he wasn't ready to reveal. "Good morning," Nathan said, his tone polite but distant. Sophie didn't respond right away. She stood, her mind racing. She wasn't sure what she was going to say, but she knew it had to be direct. She couldn't afford to be passive anymore. "Nathan," she began, her voice steady but firm. "We need to talk." Nathan raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a slight smirk. "About what?" "About everything," Sophie said, her voice trembling despite her best efforts. "About the family tree. About what you said last night. About us." Nathan's expression didn't change, but Sophie could see the shift in his posture. He took a step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. I told you before, Sophie. You're not ready for all of this. But you want the truth, don't you? Sophie nodded, her heart racing. I do. I need to understand. I need to know what's going on. Nathan's gaze softened slightly, but there was still something unreadable in his eyes. You have no idea what you're asking for, he said, his voice low. Then tell me. Help me understand, Sophie urged, stepping closer to him. What's really going on? What is this family legacy? What role do I play in it? Nathan was quiet for a long moment, as though weighing her words. Then, he sighed, his shoulders slumping. It's not that simple, Sophie. This isn't just about you. It's about your family. It's about power. And it's about survival. Sophie felt a cold chill run down her spine. What do you mean, survival? Nathan turned away from her, pacing the room. Your family has been involved in something for generations. They've been part of a secret society, one that has been working behind the scenes to control the world. To manipulate it. And you're the one they've been waiting for. Sophie's mind reeled. What? No. That can't be true. My family would never. They didn't have a choice, Nathan interrupted, his voice sharp. Your bloodline has been marked for this. Your ancestors made deals that bind you to this legacy. Whether you want it or not. Sophie shook her head, trying to make sense of his words. No. This is insane. I'm not part of any conspiracy. I'm just me. Nathan's eyes narrowed. You don't get it, do you? You're more than just you. You were born into this, Sophie. Whether you accept it or not, you're part of something bigger. And now, you have a choice to make. A choice? Sophie repeated, her voice shaky. What kind of choice? You can either accept your place in this world, Nathan said, his voice steady, almost too calm. Or you can walk away, but know that there will be consequences. Big consequences. The people who have been waiting for you won't let you go that easily. Sophie stared at him, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Her world was falling apart. The man she had married. The life she had built. It was all a lie. She had no idea who she was anymore. And worse, she had no idea what Nathan wanted from her. What game he was playing. I don't know what to believe, Sophie whispered, her voice barely audible. Nathan looked at her with something like pity in his eyes. You will. Eventually. But first, you need to make your decision. The clock is ticking. Sophie stood at the edge of a precipice, her thoughts spiraling. Nathan had laid it all like any other family. But this? The secret society. The manipulation. The dark legacy. It was too much. Her world was spinning, and she felt herself slipping. Nathan's calm demeanor only made it worse. How could he speak of these unimaginable truths without a trace of remorse? Was he trying to make her believe that she was part of something she could never escape? Or was he trying to control her? The conversation had ended abruptly, with Nathan's parting words lingering like a weight on her chest. The clock is ticking, Sophie. You have a choice to make. It felt like she had no choice at all. Sophie had spent the entire night lying awake, her mind unable to quiet the storm inside her. Every time she closed her eyes, her thoughts returned to that page in the folder, the family tree. Her name in the center. The cryptic phrase, the chosen one. What did it all mean? Why had she never been told? And what would happen if she chose to walk away from it all? She sat up in bed, rubbing her eyes as the weight of her exhaustion pressed down on her. It was morning now, but she didn't feel rested. There was no peace in her heart. No clarity in her thoughts. Sophie glanced over at the chair by the window. There, in the dim light, the folder sat, waiting. She knew she had to confront it again, even though it made her feel sick. Even though part of her wanted to ignore it and pretend that none of this had happened. But Sophie was no longer naive. She had crossed a line. There was no turning back. She rose from the bed and walked to the chair, picking up the folder. As she opened it, a note slipped out from between the pages. The handwriting was unmistakable, Nathan's. Sophie's heart raced as she unfolded the note, her eyes scanning the familiar words. You don't have to do this, Sophie. You've seen the truth. The question now is, what will you do with it? Sophie's hands shook. What did he mean? What will you do with it? What was she supposed to do? There were no clear answers. No easy path. Nathan had given her the truth, but it was a truth she wasn't sure she could accept. She felt herself torn between two worlds. The world she had known, her simple life before Nathan, before the legacy, before the mystery. And the world Nathan had shown her, full of danger, power, and secrets that ran deep into the fabric of her very being. Her heart thudded in her chest. She needed to talk to someone. Someone who could help her make sense of all of this. But who? Who could she trust now that everything had been turned upside down? Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. She picked it up, her stomach flipping as she saw the name on the screen, Lucas. Her best friend. The one person who had always been there for her, the one person who had never judged her. Sophie's fingers hovered over the screen for a moment before she answered. Lucas, she said, her voice unsteady. I need to talk. Of course, Lucas replied, his voice warm and familiar. What's going on? You sound different. Sophie closed her eyes, her emotions threatening to overwhelm her. I don't know what's real anymore, Lucas. I'm not sure I even know who I am anymore. What's happened? What's going on? Lucas asked, his concern clear in his voice. Sophie took a deep breath. She didn't want to drag him into this mess, but she had no choice. She had to tell him the truth. She needed someone who could give her a grounded perspective. Lucas, Nathan, he's been hiding things from me. There's a lot I didn't know. A lot I didn't understand, Sophie said, the words tumbling out in a rush. He told me my family's connected to some secret society. That we've been part of something bigger for generations. That my family has power. But it's not the kind of power you'd think. It's dark. It's manipulative. And now, he's telling me that I'm part of it. That she paused, the words getting stuck in her throat. That I'm the chosen one. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Sophie's heart pounded as she waited for Lucas to respond. Sophie, this sounds insane, Lucas finally said, his voice hesitant. I don't know what to say. This isn't something you can just ignore. It's too big. I don't know what to do, Sophie whispered, her voice breaking. I've been living in a lie. I don't know what's real anymore. I don't know if I can trust Nathan. Has he hurt you? Lucas asked, the concern in his voice growing. No, Sophie replied quickly. No, he hasn't. But this whole thing, it's too much. I don't know if I can keep living like this. I don't know if I can live with this legacy. With the power that comes with it. I don't even know if I want it. What's the other option? Lucas asked gently. Can you leave it behind? Is that even possible? Sophie's mind raced. She hadn't thought about that. Could she leave? Could she walk away from Nathan? Could she walk away from her family's dark history? She didn't have an answer. I don't know, she said softly. I just don't know. The conversation with Lucas gave Sophie a bit of clarity. At least now, she wasn't completely alone in this. But it also made her realize something else: she couldn't escape the truth. She couldn't run from it. No matter what decision, the decision would have to be made soon. Sophie sat by the window, staring out at the city below. The streets were busy with people moving about their daily lives, oblivious to the heavy weight she was carrying. It had been a few days since her conversation with Lucas, but nothing had changed. The truth about her family's dark past still haunted her. Nathan's words continued to echo in her mind: "The clock is ticking, Sophie. You have a choice to make." It was true. She had reached the crossroads, and no amount of denial or avoiding the inevitable would change the fact that she had to make a decision. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain: whatever choice she made, there was no going back. Her phone buzzed on the table next to her. It was a message from Nathan. "I know you're struggling. But time is running out. You must choose: align with your heritage or walk away and lose everything." Sophie's fingers hovered over the phone screen. How could he be so calm? So distant? Didn't he understand the pressure she was under? The weight of everything that had been thrown at her was almost unbearable. She needed answers. She needed closure. But was it even possible to walk away from this? Could she simply discard everything Nathan had shown her, everything she had learned about her family's legacy, and continue with her life as if nothing had happened? Or was she too far gone already? Sophie thought back to the first time she had met Nathan, the way he had looked at her, the way he had spoken to her with such confidence and purpose. At first, she had been captivated by him, drawn in by his mystery and allure. But now, she wasn't so sure. Nathan's motives were no longer clear. Was he trying to save her, or was he trying to drag her deeper into the very world she had been trying to escape? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. She didn't have to ask who it was. She knew. Nathan. Her heart began to race as she stood up, her palms sweaty. She had been avoiding him for days, but now she couldn't hide anymore. The choice had to be made. Sophie opened the door. Nathan stood there, his usual composed expression on his face. He was dressed in his typical tailored suit, his presence commanding and confident. But this time, Sophie noticed something different in his eyes. There was a flicker of something more, something uncertain. He stepped inside, and Sophie shut the door behind him, her mind racing. "I thought you might be avoiding me," Nathan said, his voice calm but with a hint of something else, something vulnerable. "I've been thinking," Sophie replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "About everything you've told me. About my family, about what you've shown me. I don't know what to think anymore, Nathan. I don't know who to trust." Nathan studied her for a long moment before speaking. "I know this is difficult. But you need to understand, Sophie. You were always meant for something more. Your family's legacy isn't something you can ignore. You can't escape it. And you can't walk away from your destiny." Sophie shook her head, frustration welling up inside her. "I don't want a destiny, Nathan. I want a choice. I want to decide what I do with my life, not be forced into something I didn't ask for." Nathan's gaze softened, and for the first time, Sophie saw a hint of regret in his eyes. "I never meant to force you, Sophie. I only wanted to show you the truth. The truth that your family has kept hidden for generations. The power. The control. It's all a part of who you are. Whether you like it or not, it's in your blood." Sophie took a step back, her mind whirling. Was this really her only option? To accept this dark legacy, to embrace something she didn't understand and might never fully control? Or was there another way? "I don't know if I can live with that," Sophie whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't know if I can live with being a part of something so manipulative. So secretive. I thought my family was normal. I thought I was normal. But now I feel like I'm just another pawn in some game I don't even understand. Nathan's face hardened slightly, his voice lowering. It's not a game, Sophie. It's survival. Your family has always been at the center of this world, pulling the strings behind the scenes. You're not just a pawn. You're the key. The world needs you to step into the role that has been prepared for you. Your family's power can't be left in the hands of anyone else. Sophie felt the walls closing in around her. Nathan was right in one sense. Her family's power was vast, and it had always been kept secret, hidden behind a veil of normalcy. But the more she heard, the more it sounded like something she could never truly escape. Was this her fate? Was she bound to this destiny, no matter how much she resisted? I don't want that power, Sophie said, her voice firm. I don't want to be part of this world. I want to live my life on my own terms, without the weight of my family's legacy hanging over me. Nathan's eyes darkened. You think you can just walk away from everything? From who you are? From what you were born into? You can't. Sophie's heart pounded in her chest. She wasn't sure if it was fear or something else, but her mind was racing. Could she really just walk away? Could she leave everything she had known behind and try to build something new for herself? Or was that just a dream, a fantasy that would never come true? Nathan's voice broke through her thoughts. You have two choices, Sophie. Join me. Join your family's legacy. Help shape the future. Or walk away and lose everything. The choice is yours, but you can't have both. The silence in the room was deafening. Sophie stood frozen, torn between two worlds. The life she had always known, and the life Nathan was offering her. The power, the control, the mystery, it was all so tempting. But it came at a cost that Sophie wasn't sure she was willing to pay. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Sophie spoke, her voice steady but resolute. I'm done with all of this. Nathan's expression faltered for a moment, but he quickly masked it with his usual cold demeanor. You're making a mistake. Sophie shook her head. No. I'm choosing to live for myself, not for some legacy I never asked for. I don't need power. I don't need control. I just need to be free. Nathan didn't say anything more. He turned and walked to the door, pausing for a moment before glancing back at Sophie. You'll regret this, he said quietly. But Sophie didn't respond. She wasn't sure if she would regret it or not, but in that moment, she knew it was the right choice. As the door closed behind him, Sophie let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She was free. She had made her choice, and she was ready to face whatever came next.